I believe that the most important question you could answer in this life is, who is Jesus? Because the answer to that question just has the potential to change everything about how you live this life. Like if Jesus was just a man, he lived and died, but he was just a man, then you're going to live one way. Like you're going to live in a way that disregards him. But if Jesus is the risen Lord and you're convinced of it, then how could you not live a completely different way? Like you don't have to be a Christian to recognize that tension, that if he actually is the resurrected Christ, you're going to do some things differently. Like you're going to give your time and your resources, your life, your unrelenting loyalty to his kingdom, even when at times living for his kingdom means suffering for his kingdom, because he is the King of Kings. It's the preeminent question, right? It always has been, even in the early church. All through Acts, this is the question the apostles are trying to answer and prove for people, because this changes everything. This is the question that Paul's ministry was all about. So in Acts chapter 17, Luke writes this, speaking of Paul, he says, he reasoned with them from the scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, saying, this Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ. Now here's the great thing about that little verse. While it sounds like just a summary statement of what Paul was up to in the synagogue, which is again explaining to them who Jesus was, it actually contains in it the very skeleton of Paul's very argument. And here it is. His argument goes like this. If number 1 and number 2, then number 3. Number 1, if the Old Testament scriptures say that the Messiah had to suffer and rise again. And number 2, if Jesus died on the cross and rose again, then number 3, then the Jesus Paul is proclaiming must be the Messiah that the scriptures talked about. There's no other answer. Okay, so take each one of those. Number 1, if the Old Testament scriptures, the Hebrew Bible, says that the Messiah had to suffer and rise again. So do they say that? Psalm 22 verse 16, for dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Like a messianic psalm about the suffering of Christ. Okay, Isaiah 53:5, another messianic verse. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. Psalm 16:10, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol or let your Holy One see corruption. The simple answer is yes. I know all those passages deserve their own study, but the Old Testament scriptures clearly prophesy of the death, the suffering, and the resurrection of a Messiah. Though that in and of itself doesn't mean much. The clincher is the answer to the next question, number 2, whether or not these things happened to Jesus. Because if these things didn't happen to Jesus, then forget about him. But if they did, if Jesus actually rose from the dead, then he is none other than the Messiah that was prophesied by the prophets. Now again, because this is kind of a skeleton of Paul's argument, we don't have this part of the argument, the number 2, but you have to imagine his argument here with something like 1 Corinthians 15, wherein he writes this, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures. There's the fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures again, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day in accordance with the scriptures, and then that he appeared to Cephas, and then to the 12, and then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to the apostles, and last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me, the apostle Paul. Now that is to say that if you don't believe he rose, go talk to one of the 500 brothers or sisters who saw him. Listen, you know how you keep lies alive and strong? You keep them contained. Like you don't tell the people you're lying to go talk to any one of the 500 other people to get the story from them. And yet Paul does exactly that. He gives them a catalog of eyewitnesses to go talk to for further evidence, because it isn't a lie. Paul, as an eyewitness himself, understood the resurrection as a historical fact. And if the scriptures promised the Messiah would rise and Jesus rose, then Jesus is the Messiah, the King. It's a pretty simple argument, isn't it? And it's the same for us today. The question is, did he rise? Like if he did, then he is who he claimed to be, the fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures, the Messiah. Well, you might say, I need more evidence than simply the scriptures, and that's fair. In which case you should go read the evidence. Like, start with the ancient documents and the accounts that talk about Jesus, talk about his death, talk about his resurrection. Like, read Thallus and Tacitus and Pliny and Suetonius and Lucian, and it goes on and on. Go read them. But don't write off the scriptures as if they are anything but the most important piece of evidence that we have. David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, he once wrote this, speaking of the power of eyewitness testimony. He said, "There is no species of reasoning more common and more useful and even more necessary to human life than that which is derived from the testimony of men and reports of eyewitness and spectators." And that is what you hold in your hands in the Gospels. Like, reliable eyewitness testimony of the death and the resurrection of Jesus, proving that Jesus is the Christ. But listen, don't take my word for it. I mean, before you leave me all these YouTube comments, go examine the scriptures for yourself. Like, be like the people of Berea, who Luke wrote, they received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Go examine for yourself and see if Paul's argument works out. Number one, if the scriptures say that the Messiah had to suffer and rise again. And number two, if Jesus died on the cross and rose again, then number three, then the Jesus Paul is proclaiming must be the Messiah of the scriptures. He must be the King of Kings, and that changes everything.